Mr. Chairman, if the Prime Minister had been sitting in the seat that he should occupy today on this estimate debate, I have a question that I would have liked to have asked him. I would have liked to ask him if the only advice that he has received from his department is, when he gets a very hard policy issue, is it just kick the tyres? Is that the only policy advice he has received from his department? Because it is the answer the Prime Minister gives to almost every difficult issue he has faced as a Prime Minister. He says, we'll just give the tyres a kick on that issue. Well, I have to say to the Prime Minister, it's time to stop kicking the tyres. How about putting a little bit of petrol in the engine and turning the motor on? Because what New Zealand wants is a plan from that government, from the leader of that party, on what their plan is for New Zealand. You see, as far as I know, Kiwis only kick the tyres when there's nothing else to do, or when they're sort of standing around having a beer at a barbecue, or when they're looking to buy a new car. But our Prime Minister thinks the answer to every problem is to give the tyres a good old kick. Well, I have to say, Prime Minister, why not get on your feet and answer the fact that there is no plan for this country from that leader of the National Party? I have never seen a party so lacking in vision and so lacking in a plan. There is no plan from this government. And all they have, as far as I can see, is a series of slogans. We're going to catch up with Australia. Now, that was going to be the big plan. Well, it's turned out to be a big slogan. And when you listen to Jerry Brownlee, the person who's supposed to be implementing the plan, he doesn't even know what the wage gap is between Australia and New Zealand. So how can we catch up with wages when the person driving economic development doesn't know? What does he tell the Prime Minister when they have their meetings? They were going to have an unrelenting focus, they said. Unrelenting focus in their quest to lift economic growth rates and wage rises. Well, of course, their unrelenting focus is one that has been all over the place because they've got no plan. How are you going to, Prime Minister, catch up with Australia in wages, in employment, in training, in skills? How are you going to catch up with Australia on investment, in research, in development, when there is no plan? There ought to be a plan for this country. They went to the country saying, don't worry, New Zealand, we can fix everything. But there is no plan. Then they had a whole series of things that would give us a step change. Remember that? Yeah. We were going to have a step change. Well, the first one out of the block was the Jobs Summit. It was going to give us a step change for New Zealand. Well, I'm afraid to say, Prime Minister, your Jobs Summit didn't give us a step change, it gave us a step back. Because there are more people unemployed today than when we left government. And when we look at the estimates, Prime Minister, we find that you're planning to have higher unemployment in 5 years' time than you had when you became the government. So the step change in terms of catching up with Australia and the Jobs Summit has been a real failure indeed. 670 odd jobs out of their 9 days fortnight. That's what they saved, about 670 jobs when you've got thousands of unemployed, and Mr. Chairman, when you have got thousands of New Zealanders unemployed, the big idea, the step change, the big plan has created about 670 jobs in New Zealand. And then, of course, there was going to be the mining. Mining here, mining there, mining everywhere, said Jerry Brownlee to his Prime Minister. He said, don't worry, Prime Minister, I've got a plan for a step change. Get out the shovels, get out the wheelbarrows, get out the diggers. We'll just dig up our wealth and we'll be on our way catching up with Australia. What happened to that plan, Mr. Chairman? What happened to the big step change from mining? Well, it fell flat on its face because they hadn't done their homework, they didn't know what they were talking about, and they didn't have a plan at all. They had a lot light bulb that went off in Jerry Brownlee's head. And the Prime Minister, who is wont to agree to everything the last person said to him, said, "That's a great idea. That's our step change for New Zealand." Then we had the great idea for a step change by having New Zealand as a Asia-Pacific hub for financial services. Well, they are laughing themselves silly in Australia because they said, "Look, we looked at that. We couldn't make it work. How does New Zealand, with just over 4 million people at the bottom of the world, think that they can run a financial hub for the Asia-Pacific when you've got countries like Singapore that could do it on their head?" And so what happened to that idea? I think that's also been parked, Mr. Speaker. And then there was the great New Zealand cycleway. Well, we all think a cycleway is a great idea, no doubt about it. But what was the big step change for New Zealanders? 4,000 jobs will be created, said the Prime Minister. Well, I know the Minister of Finance fell about laughing when the Prime Minister said that. He said, "Prime Minister, you're dreaming, and I'm not going to give you the money." And when it came to the crunch, he got the money, and the Minister of Finance was proved right. There are not 4,000 jobs to be had in building cycleways. What about the Prime Minister's tourism portfolio? Do you know, we now know that we have moteliers with occupancy of around 15% in New Zealand. It has dropped so low that we have tourist operators worried about whether they're going to have a business next week. And now we have the government with their next big step change to reduce the wages of New Zealanders. That's how they're going to make this country hum. We're going to reduce the wages of all working New Zealanders with their latest ideas, their latest crazy ideas. Mr. Chairman, this country is in desperate need of a plan, of an economic plan that New Zealanders can see is going to take them forward, because they know that Australia is motoring. They're motoring ahead. But what do we have in New Zealand? We have a gunner government. A gunner government. They're always going to do something. They're going to do something on Monday. They're going to do something on Wednesday. They're going to do something on Friday. But they haven't actually turned the motor on yet. They haven't actually put any petrol in the engine. We say, get a move on. Give New Zealand a plan, because I have to tell New Zealanders, this party has a plan for economic development and recovery in this country, and you're going to hear about it over the next few days. We had one when we were in government. We will have one when we return to government in 2011. You see, this party in government is so scared of being called PC that they won't tackle the hard issues. You see, they're very brave at bashing beneficiaries, but when it comes to the real hard issues, they're too scared of being labelled PC. Well, I say they're not a PC government, no, they're more like a gutless government, one that has not got the internal fortitude to tackle the hard issues. And nothing could have been clearer than the Prime Minister vetoing any changes when it comes to blood alcohol level in terms of drivers. That was an area they could have shown some leadership, but they did not have the internal fortitude to be able to do it. I say that this is a two-faced government that will grin and wave at everybody they talk to, led by the Prime Minister, but they will not make the hard decisions. Give us a plan, national-led government. It must be an agony to your coalition partners watching you wallow.